Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph Karugia, for that insight. And indeed, I think what resonates between what the presentations that have been made by Dr. Paul Gudiga, Dr. Vivian Hoffman, and Dr. Joseph Karugia is that we need to have some action, and not just review and create, but we need to have some joint action and repeated interaction with the stakeholders who are key to ensuring that food safety, our food safety system, has gotten to a point where it serves the nation holistically. So as the presentations have really brought together the discussion that we're going to have after this, which is a panel discussion with some very keynote speakers who have been very instrumental in ensuring that food safety at both county and national level are moving at the pace within which they're supposed to be moving. Vietnam case study that has been presented by Dr. Karugi highlight what we have tried to do within the county and national aspect, and the capacity building programs that both Voice for Change and international governments have tried to put into place. All this to happen, to ensure that we have a food safety system that works, requires investment. That is budgetary investment, both by public and private sector. And that is why I'd want to introduce our keynote speakers for panel discussion today. And our panel discussion today is going to be twofold. We're looking at two areas. How is public and private sector going to invest in food safety? Are we doing enough in terms of investment in food safety? And if we are investing, how can we show this investment holistically? And the fragmentation of the Kenya food safety system. Is there fragmentation or is there not? Are we ensuring that we can coordinate stakeholders within the food safety system to make sure that all actors are working together for the greater goal, which is to ensure food safety for all Kenyans? I would like to introduce all our keynote speakers. First, we have from the Ministry of Health, Deputy Director of Public Health, Dr. Robert Kilonzo. We also have Deputy Director of Horticulture at the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Joshua Oliali. Third, we have a senior official from the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization. This is Mrs. Roslyn Mumbo. We'll also be joined by the County Executive from Nakuru, Agriculture. After that, we'll also have an IEA associate, Mr. Joram Gishiru, who has worked within the food safety industry and understands the ins and outs of food safety and would like to hear his views on how Kenya is performing. We also have the chair of ASNET, KEPSA, Mr. Bimal Kantaria, Dr. Bimal Kantaria. We also have the chair of the Nyandarua Dairy Cooperative, Joseph Murega. All these keynote speakers will be joining us for our panel discussion, ideally to look at those two questions that we want to dive into. Is there enough public and private sector investment in food safety? And when we look at fragmentation in the Kenya food safety system, how can we address this fragmentation? So to kick off, our first to this panel is, given what has been presented by IFPRI and ILRI, linking how investment in food safety does affect how we can actually combat food safety, there seems to be a strong correlation. So the question is, has the public and private sector identified the need to invest in food safety budgets? And if so, how has this been done? I'd like to direct this question to Dr. Robert Kilonzo from the Ministry of Health to give us his views from the national level. Have you been able to invest adequately in food safety? And if so, how has the Ministry of Health done that?
Thank you very much, Brenda, for this opportunity to participate in this wonderful discussion. The earlier presenters, they have done excellent well in trying to bring the topic into the focus. Very good presentations from Vivian, good presentations from Paul, and the others. And back to your question, we need to realize that food safety is a friend to every nation. And therefore, you'll find that in most of the cases, food safety, the government will have a total interest. Because you don't get it right with the food safety, you don't get it right with the citizens. Because you need food for your survival. With respect to budgeting and allocation to food safety, let me say that generally, there have been two scenarios in country Kenya, before and after devolution. Looking at before devolution, the funding, I can say it was heavy on food safety. For those who have been able to look at the data which has been presented, if you could see before devolution what was happening, there was a bit of a high allocation on matters of food safety by the national government. That is the exchequer, that is the treasury, the money which is from the government. Come devolution, some parts of food safety were devolved, and other functions were left with the national government. And from where I sit, more of our interest is on the policy. More of our interest is on the law. More of our interest is on the guidelines, the manuals, and the protocols which we have to churn out for the use by both the government, the county governments, and all the actors within the various value chains. That is more to say of capacity building. But at the county level, the provisions of the Schedule 4 of the constitutions are so clear. And there's those mandates which have been taken to the county governments. And you see the Financial Management Act, it's very clear on the process of budgeting within the two levels of government. And therefore, there's a felt need that we need to improve budget allocation at the two levels, both at the national government and at the local government, at the county governments. As you saw, the case is the way the issue is currently, there are so many challenging priorities for the government. Like the scenario where we are in now, we have already finalized our budgeting for this financial year. There is what we have tried to propose for the allocation of for food safety. And there's what we have been allocated. But always keeping in mind the current pandemic which we are facing, that is the COVID-19, and whereby in the event worst case scenario comes, there will be a lot of movement of funds from areas where they have been allocated into the current emergency. And that's how used to happen even before devolution. That whenever you have an emergency, definitely you have to save lives first. So all other things come second. First, you need to save life. And therefore all the powers and all the monies and redirected to the current emergency. That notwithstanding, there is what we at the national government, the Ministry of Health, we have been able to look into so that we have been able to achieve this financial year. And we have tried as much as possible to look into the coordination part of it. The scenario from Vietnam, and whereby you have been able to place food safety at the office of the Prime Minister, that is at a high level, yes. And like in the comments of the presenter, that the coordination does not mean it's just a matter of you calling for meetings and arguing here and there, no. But looking at common way of planning and implementing the plans. Yes, I can say we are almost there despite the so many actors who we are. For example, all the actors on food safety at the national level, We are now operating at what we are calling multi-annual national control plan. Through a support which we have got for the last 2 years from Denmark, whereby each agency, we have tried to work out our multi-annual national control plan. First, after agreeing on the principles of food control, whereby we are changing the philosophy. And in line with that, as a Minister of Health, what we have tried to pick areas of interest for food chains. This is with respect to the common hazards which are so disturbing us as a country. And in all the 4 chains, we are more concerned with the domestic market. We are looking at the fruits and vegetables, that is the horticulture. And this is with respect to pesticide residues and microbial contamination. Second of concern is cereals and legumes. And here we have the infamous contaminant, the mycotoxins, both fumonisin and aflatoxins, an area of concern. We again looking at the dairy and the dairy products. And here again is both microbial contamination and issues of mycotoxins, the M1s in the milk and all that. And the last and not the least is the meat. You look at the chain, the meat and the meat products. Our key issues of concern here is the fatty drug residues and the misuse of food additives. So in a nutshell, as you can see the chains which we want to concentrate in for this financial year, which has just started because our financial years, they started from July, is almost driving towards the voice of change, the voice for change partnership is looking at. And therefore, as we see, we will not be having enough money to underhold this. And therefore, we are trying to loop in various actors who are going to support us to achieve this. I don't know whether Brenta have tried to give, in a nutshell, what we as a ministry, we are looking into. And before I give you back the mic, I want to say that the philosophy here with respect to food control is that we are changing the game. We are looking at a time whereby the responsibility squarely is left with the food business operator. What does this mean? It means you have to get enough funding for you to handle the capacity building of the food business operators. It means the county governments, they have to pick this. How will you capacity build the food business operator? Definitely, you have to let him know that he will be responsible for what is able to churn for consumption. He will be responsible for what is manufacturing. And for him to do that, you have to ensure that you give him the proper materials. You have to give him the correct manuals. You have to give him the correct guidelines. And for him to develop his own internal standard operating procedures. So that when the official control comes to make an evaluation, it's a matter of asking, can you demonstrate to me that the measures you are putting in place are able to address matters of food safety? And that is the philosophy which we want to change. And this is cutting across not only us from the Ministry of Health, but through DVS, through Kenya Plant Health, through Kenya Bureau of Standards, and all these organizations, national government organizations, and by extension, county governments, with respect to food safety. Thank you, Brenta.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kilonzo. I think those are very pertinent points that you've provided. And I like that you've highlighted that investment needs to be done both by national and county government, and that without collaboration at all levels of government, indeed, we cannot be able to tackle food safety, even when it comes to identifying where we need to invest. I'd like to throw the same question to the Ministry of Agriculture, Deputy Director of Horticulture, Mr. Joshua Oluyali, just to provide some insight into, as the Ministry of Agriculture, what kind of investments have you made in safety, looking at that we need monitoring and valuation, investment in extension services. And as mentioned by Dr. Kilonzo, we have issues of pesticide residues, and that has been an issue that has cut across small-scale and large-scale farmers, which touches on investment and food safety. So, Mr. Joshua Liali, kindly give us some insight on what Ministry of Agriculture has done as a unit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brenda, and all members. Good morning. Now, I wish to start by thanking Voice for Change for making it possible for us to have this discussion, and also for the awareness it has continued to create among the special interest group, including government. I think it has been very important that we have chosen this method of evidence-based advocacy. We as government really appreciate the effort that Voice for Change has put in to ensure that some of us who didn't have information about food safety, we have taken a very keen interest, and therefore we are able to, we would wish to address those problems as raised by most of the presenters. So the problem I want to
Joshua, we seem to have lost you.
You have lost me?
It's working fine. It's working.
You can't hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say that the problem of safe food is actually in both domestic and export market. And our markets are really dwindling because of the problem of MRLs. And therefore, we are looking at this problem as a general problem, not just in our domestic. And then secondly, also, I would wish to assure Kilonzo that the Ministry of Agriculture would wish to hand over safe food to public health so that we can manage it in food outlets when it's already safe. Because we know most of the problems in issues of quality occur at production and handling level. So what are these problems? I think it was mentioned by one of the presenters that we have this integrated small order production system, very difficult to manage. Then we have the responsible use of pest control products in management of pests and diseases. Then you have lack or poor post-harvest handling facilities and infrastructure. I'm sure many of us have visited our markets, and we have seen the way our food is handled at the markets. There is no capacity by SMEs, or what we call food business operators, in safe handling of food. And number 5 is low awareness. That is the reason for inadequate funding was because most government officers were not aware about the issue of food safety. But I'm sure with the increasing awareness, we are going to have more and more of budgets occurring, being done for money to be allocated to food safety at both national and county level. So what are we planning to do? The first thing we are starting this year is to establish a market production and marketing clusters so that we can bring all these smallholder farmers together to ensure that we're able to manage quality and safety of food. We are also going to have a baseline for all the food business operators, including knowing their skills and the gaps that they have in areas of food safety, so that we can start capacity building them on the same. Then we are going to undertake continuous sampling and analysis of foods at various markets so that we are able to assure every Kenyan and every person consuming our food, including our partners, that the food we are sending out of this country is safe. Last year, through the support with the Voice for Change, we were able to develop a food safety management plan. And it has been done, but what we are missing is that we have not completed putting on the figures. So we hope that once this is done, now we can be able to present it for funding from various sources, including government. And of course, most importantly, capacity building of food business operators is inevitable. When you talk about our transporters taking our food on open lorries, it's an issue of capacity. Do they know that it is dangerous to do that? And secondly, do they have resources to improve on those trucks? So during the trainings that you're going to have, and I'm happy that you're with the Ministry of Trade on this panel, we want to ensure that our SMEs are actually have the capacity to handle the food in a safe way so that we can be able to ensure Kenyans of safe food. And lastly, of course, we don't lack some bad elements among the system. So those ones that will not be able to abide by the laws, then we have regulations to enforce as government to ensure that we have safe food. So I think, Brenda, in a nutshell, that is what I would want to assure the meeting, that as Minister of Agriculture, we are committed and we are starting the work as soon as this month. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oliali. And I think, Dr. Kilonzo, you've been given the great task of ensuring food safety and safe health to the nation. And that indeed, of course, still needs a lot of coordination within the different ministries. And as we've discussed, counties need to indeed create systems that ensure there's indeed investment in food safety. And I'd like to invite the Chief Officer of Agriculture in Laikipia County, Mr. Mungere, has joined us. And if you could kindly give us an insight into how the county of Laikipia, and this would be ideally a representation of how counties are investing in food safety and coordinating with the national government to ensure that the people of your county are accessing safe food. Mr. Mungere?
Thank you, Brenda. And now the panelists and the participants. Laikipia, just like any other county, we are also struggling, we are only in the second term of generation of the devolution and government. But out of organization with SOCA and SNV, we have been able to do a few things. One, we are in the process of we have done a pilot on livestock identification and traceability system. And now we want to roll out now for market. And this is essentially for beef. As you know, like if you are, I would say, I think we are best in the beef in the country, if not in the region and the world. So we are using, the list is in place and we are working very closely with World Vision and we are targeting traceability for beef, like we have seen in Vietnam case, farm to fork. And that is in the process. We hope by 2020, 2021, we have put infrastructures in place. The gadgets are in the process of procurement. And we want to do that so that we can be able to get safe food for the consumers all the way in the food value chain for beef. For crops, we have identified one is the tomatoes. As you know, tomatoes are grown by many of the small horticultural producers. And the bigger horticultural producers go for French beans. There's not much big problem there, but our problem is in the small scale for tomatoes. Laikipia is, I think, is number 1 or number 2 at the national level in terms of production. However, we have issues of the chemicals that we use. And these chemicals sometimes, they have a residue time and taken care of. But as you know, the producers sometimes don't declare, and you may find some of these food get into the market even before the residue time is over. So we are working very closely with SOCA and find out how we can sensitize targeted crops of tomatoes, French beans, onions, so that you can get them closer to the market. For the county involvement is that we have tried to put clusters, identifying technical officers in these areas who will be sensitized and be working very closely with the producers to ensure that the proper handling of chemicals that are used are proper ones. And we also make sure that the food goes to the market safe. So in this financial year, we, through the interest also for our governor, is that we need to do what we call water for production. We want to increase our irrigation capacity so that we can go to high value crops. And in this process, we hope now we can integrate the food safety in the production systems of the horticulture. And we are hopeful that through collaboration with SNV, SOCA, and ourselves and national government, and another key stakeholder, we will deliver safe food to the consumer at the local level, national level, and at the international level. Thank you. Brenda?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mungeri. Very key insights, specifically from a county perspective. And I think we can't leave out, of course, private sector, because investment cannot only be done by public sector, but we need to see how private sector, who also form some of the food business operators, how can we ensure that as private sector as well, we're investing our budgets in food safety. So I'd like to invite Dr. Bimal Kantaria, Chair of ASNET, to provide us with some insight on how the private sector is currently investing in food safety. And as KEPSA, as a body that represents private sector, what are you doing and how are you working with the public sector, national and county government, to realize the dream of food safety in Kenya? Thank you, Dr. Bimal.
Thank you very much indeed, Brenda. You can hear me properly? So thank you very much for this very interesting discussion on food safety.
Yes, you're very clear.
Thanks, Brenda. So I think it's probably the right time that this discussion has come up, and I want to thank the organizers for including at least private sector participation in these kind of discussions. I do want to also recognize some of our partners in government are here. I see from Ministry of Agriculture, I see Dr. Soka's here, and from the private sector from SDG platform. So a lot of our partners that we already work with at KEPSA are already present on this webinar. A quick introduction on what ASNET is. ASNET is the overall umbrella body for agricultural private sector organizations, including all the various BMOs and value chains, research and educational institutions, as well as the development partners like IFAD and, as I said, SDG platform. We're trying to bring everybody together in the private sector under the umbrella of ASNET, which was recently launched by CS Munia in February. And we've been working about a year on the organization. So it's become quite a good vehicle for all sort of agriculture related discussions to be under the umbrella of ASNET. And I'm happy that Soka and Jane, everybody are part of the team anyway. We've tried as much as possible in the private sector as well as in KEPSA and other BMOs like CAM to be have as much collaboration as possible with government and at county level. If you see the recent trend in the last 5 years, it's no longer about government versus private sector. I think we need to keep talking about how we as Kenyans can improve the system. And that is very important in the discussions going forward. A number of the speakers earlier on were government related, and I want to pass a message on to you that we're here as private sector. We are the sort of the implementation arm of what you as government put the policies out there. So where you can, we strongly encourage government to have associations with us lot in the private sector. That's why if you look at what we've been doing in the last 6 months, we formed very strong links with the Ministry of Agriculture. We now have a technical committee composed of ASNET as well as Ministry of Agriculture people chaired by myself and PS Kimtai. We meet every 2 weeks. And a lot of the stuff that you're discussing today in food safety, some of these things on the agenda. And we found that just by talking to one another, a lot of these issues are resolved quite quickly. There's a great deal of suspicion between government and private sector on what each other's motives are. But I think once we get talking at a more of a national level, a lot of these issues we realize can be easily resolved. We also have a full-time technical committee with the EAC now, EAC Ministry under PS Kevin Desai. And an important resolution we now came out with, we formed a sort of a semi-permanent committee on aflatoxin, where KEBS and private sector and all the various departments related to aflatoxin now meet regularly. We had a first meeting a couple of weeks ago. We have a next meeting coming up. So just by us interacting with one another and having a more open-minded discussion on where the problems are, I think a lot of these issues can be results. So it's not necessarily how much investment is going into the sector, but how is that investment being used, and is it used correctly? So that's one of the messages I wanted to put across today. What we as private sector also have a big worry is sometimes how government works in silos. If you look at KEBS or Ministry of Industry or Minister of Agriculture, sometimes all of these departments seem to be just focused on what they do. So if you look at really a horrible example was when we were discussing on maize flour 6 months ago. We were discussing with Ministry of Agriculture problems of aflatoxin. We met KEBS. Suddenly overnight, the decision was taken to ban a certain brand from the market without proper consultation. And what that did was just destroyed years of private sector investment in that brand. People became very reluctant to buy that product. But in life, we know that there are ways of handling these kind of crises, and you could have withdrawn them systematically from the market rather than just going wholesale and banning the whole product. So sometimes we feel in private sector that maybe whilst we want to collaborate with government, sometimes we don't see the reciprocity in that. Another very interesting example is an NGO right now from Germany who keeps talking about food safety and MRLs and agrochemicals and telling us we should be banning all our agrochemicals in this country because they're not approved in Europe. But that's completely unscientific. We've seen over the last 6 months, the matter was discussed at Senate Agriculture Committee, PCBB was involved, these permanent secretary was involved. So sometimes you have these kind of organizations which have, not necessarily a national view and maybe have a special interest in a certain subject. And that's the reason we are saying we need to collaborate with government. Government needs to talk to private sector as well, considering that we're ultimately all Kenyans. We're not here to hurt anybody or destroy our own market. Finally, I think the view is that there is enough standards in the system of food safety. Look at what KEBS have come out with. The systems are in place. There's no denying that. And government has actually been very good and very responsive to the concerns of the public when it comes to food safety. Of course, there is a formal sector, informal sector, and we can have a debate about which sector needs more regulation. But in our opinion, where the formal sector comes in, I think there's enough regulation in place from KEBS and Minister of Agriculture and Minister of Health in certain cases. It's a question of implementation and compliance of these kind of standards. So I think that if you need to put investment, I think investment should be put in two areas. One is in more education for these standards and compliance of them. And secondly, more investment in time and effort in working with organizations like KEBSA and CAM and ASNET, so that the wishes of the government, we are there to implement for you. I know time is short, so I'm gonna leave it there and say to our friends in government that we're here to talk to you. KEBSA has always been a very strong organization standing in partnership with government. KAM is there, ASNET is there. Use our BMO organizations to sometimes further your causes. But thank you very much indeed for allowing us to talk. And Gloria, and back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bimal, for your comments. And I think very key points that you've made. And I'd like to piggyback on your points, especially in terms of how government is working with different ministries, how that collaborative structure should be in place to ensure all ministries are on the same page when it comes to where are we directing our investment. And I would like to invite Mrs. Rosalind Mumbo from the Ministry of Trade to highlight, as a senior officer or official in the Ministry of Trade, how are you working with Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, to really ensure that, especially like in the markets, clear investments are being made to sensitize those working in the markets and those working within the industry of trade. What are you doing to make sure that food safety is clearly being invested in and the investment is actually going to the right areas? Rosalind? I can't seem to get a hold of Rosalind Mumbo, but I think we can get back to her once she's logged back on. We do have someone from the Ministry of Budget. This is Mr. Samuel Masharia, and you work in the ministry which we would like to call the budget holder and controller of our investment in food safety, if I may say so. So Mr. Samuel Masharia, Senior Department Director of Budget. Kindly give us your views on how does the Ministry of Planning and Budget work together with the different departments in the Ministry of Health and Agriculture and Trade to ensure that what we are investing in is directed to the correct areas or sectors that need investment. Mr. Macharia?
Thank you, Brenda. Participants, good morning. I think this is a very important topic. I think I've listened to the various speakers, and there's a case in point whereby we have to look at the food and nutrition security and safety. I think in the budget we have various items which actually reflects funding on this, but maybe what we need maybe is a bit of coordination. I think from what I've heard from the various speakers, I think we have various sectors. We have about 10 sectors, and these ministries do not belong to the same sector. So our budget cycle starts from July and ends in June of the next financial year. So I think what I think the federal stakeholder need to do is to participate in the budgeting process, because actually the government cannot fund something which is outside its policy priorities, and so the federal stakeholders, including the ministries, they have to participate in the budgeting process in the federal sectors. This normally starts in July, August, when we issue guidance to the ministry on how to prepare the budgets. And then we have the federal sectors. Like myself, I'm the convener for the agriculture, rural and urban development, where I think the issue of food security and nutrition falls. I think this is a part of also the Big Four agenda for the president. So I think if they can participate and actually are able to convince the sector that they need some money or they need some funding in some of these critical areas, I believe they should be considered. And I believe there are already areas that we have funded on food safety. If you look at the issue of aflatoxin, we have some funding on aflatoxin. We are doing also some laboratories, that is in fisheries. We have done some laboratories actually to look at the safety of fish that is being distributed to the citizens. And I think also we are funding like the data board and other areas. Further, if you can look at the budget, our budget actually, there are various areas, but I don't think they are coordinated. But I think it's something that we need actually to consult as amenities which are contributing to this agenda of food safety. I think we are ready, and I think this is an area that can be considered for funding. I think it's a critical area because actually it's also related to health. So if you look at maybe the costs that we're incurring at health, maybe we can be able to solve them under the issue of food and nutrition and security. So I urge all the relevant ministers actually to join us, maybe as we have already done the budget for the next financial year. But the budget for now, 2021, 2022, it will be starting in August. So I think we can have a discussion on how maybe we can join. And we can also maybe see how we can also engage other actors, the donors, and other partners who can help us in this. Because it's an area actually which requires quite substantial funding. And as you are aware now, we have this, as the speaker from, from health said, that we have the COVID. If you look at the budget that we have now, and even the revenues that we are generating, and the competing needs, I think sometimes it's difficult actually to balance all these issues, but it's something that we can look at, Brenda. I think because of time, I think that's what I can say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Masharia. Very key points that you brought out. I think what I can really pinpoint from what you've said is there's a greater need to drive more consultation and investment with all the ministries working in tandem. I'd like to invite Dr. Immaculate Maina, this is the CEC Agriculture for Nakuru, to give us her views on how the county of Nakuru County, Laikipia County, Nyandarua County, and Murang'a County. And the CC from Nakuru, Dr. Immaculate, can provide us with an overview of how, as a county, you've been able to actually invest fully in food safety, looking at investing in the food safety system, digital tools that can be used in the county, and also extension services, because these are key issues that I'm seeing even as I glance at the Q&A section. People are curious to know, how are the counties addressing food safety? How is the public participating, or the role of public participation in ensuring that there is investment put across to food safety? So Dr. Immaculate, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Hello?
Yes, Dr. Immaculate, we can hear you, yes.
Very good.
Yes, Dr. Immaculate, can you hear us? Kindly continue.
We continue to work around matters of food safety, but we are not where we believe we should be. Starting with the fact that we have a large horticulture production system and a large dairy production system, which are the two areas of greater impact as far as food safety is concerned, and as far as this conversation is going. I want to start by saying that as a county, we have emphasized lessons on food safety. We do not have a specific budget that is earmarked for food safety. And so what we are doing is to inbuild food safety aspects in our operations. And the way that we do that is that we always wish to have our extension staff sensitizing farmers on clean production, and also on the way that the food is stored and is taken to the market. Now, on the matter of production, we continue to emphasize that we use only the molecules that have been registered, so that then we don't have too high of the residue effects. On the matter of transportation, in the various value chains, we are looking at the example of horticulture. We still have a challenge because there isn't a criteria for what kind of vehicle shall carry horticulture produce. But for other value chains like milk and meat, we have the licensing of the containers where the meat is put, and even the fish. The standards for transportation of milk, we have a challenge in the fact that we still have a lot of milk going on in plastic containers rather than the aluminum or the stainless steel. We are beginning to have a conversation on how we can move from plastic to stainless steel, but that's a difficult conversation given that it requires investment at the farm level for farmers to buy the relevant containers. We've had a conversation with one of the financing agents in the county to see how they can bring in financing for milk containers to our cooperative societies. That is an ongoing conversation, and we hope that it will bear some fruit in the coming days. Further to that, I would say that all of us in the county of Nakuru are very concerned with a safety of food, because Nakuru County is the highest producer of food globally across all value chains. In Kenya, when you put it all together, an aggregate amount of food, a large amount of food is coming out of Nakuru County. And so we've gone ahead and we want to thank SNV and Agrify for the support we have received to be able to come up with a bill that has passed through the executive and is now ready to be tabled in the county assembly to discuss matters of food safety for the county of Nakuru. These are progressive conversations, but as far as resources are concerned, we struggle with that. We don't have specific budgets for it, and we continue to inbuild our food safety activities within our ongoing programming across the county. That's what I'll say for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Immaculate, for your comments. And I'd like to bring back Mrs. Rosalind Mumbo from the Ministry of Trade to give us insights into how the Ministry of Trade is working with other ministries to ensure that food safety is maintained, seeing that you handle one of the biggest dockets, which is the markets, where we get our food, fresh produce. So, Madam Mumbo, can you hear us? Kindly give us your views. Rosalind Mumbo, can you hear us? Okay, I think we'll get back to her later. I'd like to bring back the discussion to Mr. Joseph Murega. Mr. Joseph Murega is the chair of the Nyandarua Dairy Cooperative. And as someone who works directly with the farmers, as a former cooperative, as a chair of the Nyandarua Farmers Cooperative, kindly let us know, when you, in this discussion, investments in food safety, as a representative of the farmers, how have you seen the investment in food safety trickle down to the cooperatives at the county level? So, Mr. Murega, kindly provide us with your insights. How have you, as a farmer, really seen the trickle down of investment down to the county level, at the cooperative level? Mr. Murega? We seem to have lost Mr. Murega as well, but definitely come back to him, because it is key to hear from the farmers and how farmers are actually managing, how they're receiving investment in food safety. Maybe I can move to Mr. Joram Gisheru. Joram Gisheru is an IEA associate. This is the Institute of Economic Affairs, and has worked within the Ministry of Agriculture and really understands issues that we're facing within the food safety system. So Mr. Joram Gisheru, if you can hear me, kindly give us your views as someone who's worked in the industry on how this has changed, how investment has changed, and how we view food safety. Mr. Joram Gisheru, in case you're muted, you can unmute yourself. I'm seeing Rosalind Mumbo is actually back. Can you hear us, Rosalind?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, Rosalind, yes. So kindly, we wanted to hear your views from the Ministry of Trade. How are you handling investment, especially handling a big docket such as the market where we get our fresh produce? Rosalind, how is the Ministry of Trade working with other ministries, and how are you investing in this particular space?
Thank you, Brenda. As the Ministry of Trade, we are so keen about food safety, particularly because it leads to a lot of rejection in the international markets of our product, and also the fact that it reduces human dignity when we see sickness of children and the public, the foodborne diseases increasing, and also the closure. We are concerned because it leads to closure of markets and closure of hotels and processing companies. So at the end of the day, if these businesses are closed, then our mandate for business development is affected. So to see how far what we are doing about the food safety issues in the trade department, we are seeing ourselves as the enablers of food safety because we know the health people, it's in their docket. But now at the market center or as trade department, we are concerned, number one, with trade development because food safety issues start when turnover is low. When retailers or wholesalers get products and they stay for a long time in a particular place, they rot and their value now decreases. So we think about issues that can bring quick turnover. And on that note, we do a lot about SME training. So they set proper strategies that can give them more markets and sales. And apart from SME training, we have focused on training processors in productivity and quality because they can get good raw material, yes, but if they keep them and they rot because of overstocking, at the end of the day, they produce bad product. So when we teach them on quality improvement and control and actually work with them at the shop floor, an activity we call on-site consulting, then we see they smoothen their production system and at the end of the day they get products with high quality. So that's a program we are doing with JICA to actually help the small and large enterprises. For the SMEs, we just do them as normal products through our Department of Business Training. Also, we have seen that most products get spoiled because of poor packaging. Things like milk, things like even bread, flour. So, on training of appropriate packaging, we find SMEs improving what they deliver to the public. Apart from that, we have seen a lot about labeling. So the Department of Weights and Measures have a department called KECOPA that actually train consumers to look at the date of expiry. I know majority we just buy things not knowing it has gone mold and it will affect our lives. So we actually help the SMEs, the buyers, get to be sensitive about what they are consuming and demand for quality. And then now this upward demand will force the suppliers of this product, both processors and retailers, to give the right product.
Yes, I have unmuted.
Oh, okay. On that note, we actually want the consumer to demand quality products, and then
maybe if there was a way of offline.
Okay. So do I continue? Number 2 is improving financing of SMEs. You find people would want to invest in things that make them provide quality products. But if they don't have money or accessing this money becomes difficult, it becomes a problem. So the Department of Internal Trade has been giving a finance called a Joint Loan Board, but which was devolved. And since it was devolved, it has never started functioning. Why? Because the legal framework had not been done, and therefore the counties just stopped giving. The money is there and cannot be accessed. So we are working on those legal framework to see to it that the counties start giving out this money to SMEs who want to use it for business improvement. Again, we want to offer technical assistance to trade development officers because the bigger part of trade development was devolved, and now the county trade development officers are more in charge, particularly of the markets, the actual market infrastructure. So most of them are new, so they don't know the appropriate design for modern markets. And we have developed what is called the county engagement strategy, that we want to help them understand all these designs and build appropriate markets, that when products are put on it, it will not be affected. We have seen people eating bananas or vegetables on the floor or on the mud at the marketplace, and people are so unaware of the health hazard. They buy these fruits and eat immediately. So if these stalls are erected and allocated appropriately, we feel our public will eat the right food. And therefore, the market infrastructure with good cleaning areas and appropriate stalls can actually solve the issues we are seeing. So when we work with the trade development officer, we'll do that. And on the same market infrastructure, there is what we call stall allocation. You find few people get stalls, majority lack, and therefore they have to put their products on the floors or in muddy areas. So we are developing a guideline on how stalls should be allocated, and it's about to be completed so that our people are not affected. The same entrepreneurship development, we are thinking about strengthening the BMOs and the producer groups. So that is the clusters that are coming up, so that the leadership of this structure are sensitive about product safety. And on the same, some of them can be taught on actual food safety issues, and they can teach the other people. So when we capacity build the clusters or the producer group on food safety issues, we feel they will do it. And then apart from the entrepreneurship development, which is the major part of our work, we have an objective in our trade state department of growth and development of wholesale and retail markets. Wholesale and retail markets. And when we talk about that, mostly we are thinking about the supermarkets. The supermarkets we have in Kenya first, and also the retailing markets we are doing in Kenya. Now supermarkets, we are seeing most of them are getting closed, unfair trade practices. And when they get closed, farmers will not find a place to sell their goods. So we developed what we call the word has disappeared. The code of practice, sorry, Brenda. The code of practice for retail sector is supposed to align the activities that are taking place with these supermarkets. So we are planned only to meet two counties and sensitize them on the code of practice because of limitation on funds. Last year we again sensitized to see the capacity of trade department is large because we have staff, but the allocation of funds is little. So we actually meet very few at a time to spread this code of practice so that they'll do good business and therefore attract more business. Apart from the supermarkets, we are thinking about post-COVID issues in the retail sector, especially the informal sector. We are seeing a situation where this time now many people have gone to business. Some are new, and like Mr. Joshua had said, and they have very little business knowledge. So for these businesses to grow and not fall in their first birthday when we turn next year, we are thinking of a way to capacity build them to continue, and also to look for spaces for expansion. There is another activity we do called business environment improvement. All these are to facilitate trade development. Now, how do we envisage to do this? We have developed what is called guidelines on principles of trade licensing. Trade licensing, you have seen how most business people suffer about paying license, and because they want to evade, they pile up the product. At the end of the day, the products reach when they are not in good condition. They rot and people consume bad products. So we have developed that, and we want to see to it that it starts, the implementation starts. Again, to ensure that more Kenyan products are used, the turnover to increase, we developed what is called a local content policy. And in this policy, we envisage a situation where the processors in Kenya will actually use 40% of Kenyan produce. And if this happens, again, we'll have created a bigger market. And this, it has been developed, and we have started implementation, getting reports, but there are some sectors who have not developed their own guidelines. So the process is a bit slow. On the international side, we want to improve access to markets, because when we visit counties that are overproducing, now we see glut, we see a lot in one area, and this, if aggregated well, can be exported. So to access the outside market, we are thinking about improving cross-border trade, and this again will have to capacity build the trade officers. So there's a plan to work together with trade officers at the border point, and even build an office, if possible, where now the international trade activities will take place. On top of that, there are more negotiations that are going on in COMESA, East Africa Community, and other AGOA, so that we sell more outside the country. And if this succeeds, we'll open up more markets, and our business people will find a bigger market. So with that, I believe if what we have can flow quickly, then we will have even less stores, and therefore contamination will be less. These wholesalers can pick the product at the aggregation center faster, cross the border, and take them where they are needed. Because more of food safety issues happen because of overhandling. They leave the farm, they go to the market, this market to another market to another market. At the end of the day, it reaches the consumer when it is contaminated. So we believe with these activities and even more, which I will develop and send you in written form, we can actually help food safety issues reduce in Kenya. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rosalind, for the insights. I think what I can pick immediately from your presentation is that a lot of capacity building is needed, and a lot of creation of awareness is required to make sure that we are all working together, even if the Ministry of Trade is investing in as much as it can in the markets, in the youth and entrepreneurship. How can we all ensure that we're working together to achieve food safety? I'd like to quickly bring in Nyandarua Dairy Cooperative Chair, Mr. Joseph Murega, because I think it's very key to hear from the farmer's perspective. How has the investment in food safety been seen at the farmer's end? Are you seeing the investment? And what would you want to say to the ministries that are here and to the county representatives that are here on how, as farmers, you'd want to be represented, and what kind of investment you'd want to see in food safety to ensure that as the farmers from the ground up, we are collaborating with our implementers and our regulators. Yes, so Mr. Joseph Murega.
Thank you very much, Brenda. I hope now you can hear me. Earlier on, I tried to come on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I want to begin by thanking all the presenters who have made very good contributions and very, very insightful. I want to particularly single out Dr. Gudiga on the issue of the budget tracking. I think that for me was very critical, because a lot of times, government budget, but they don't spend on the same areas. So thank you very much for that. So to your specific question, let me begin by saying that as farmers, we have seen some effort from government in terms of helping the farmers to achieve food safety. If I begin with the dairy sector, I know the county government and also the national government have invested in provision of milk coolers, which of course milk coolers is a very, very integral part in terms of the safety of milk. But having so said, I also want to say that the need is still very high. There's still a very, very, very serious gap in terms of what the government should do in terms of assisting all the farmers to be able to chill their milk within 2 to 3 hours after milking. So efforts have been made, but I think there's still a lot of room that requires to be done. In terms of other fresh produce, I want to say that in terms of food safety, nothing much really has been done. There has been interventions attempted in areas of production and a bit also in areas of market access. But when I look at structures that you need to have in place so that you can guarantee food safety, then I think in terms of the food crops, which Nyandarua is also very famous for, then there is a lot of room, there is a lot of need for interventions from government to be done. I know currently I was looking at the county budget and looking at what specifically is there in terms of food safety. And I would say that there's need to increase funding towards specific for food safety. This is the areas of milk chilling. These would be in areas of storage, cold storage for fresh produce. This would also be in terms of training of farmers in terms of food safety. Particularly, one of the very serious concern areas is the testing equipment, the milk testing equipment. You realize that a lot of times when we say milk is unsafe, it is a question of, do the farmers and the cooperatives have the capacity to test the milk at point of correction? And the big answer is no. I give an example. If you want to test for antibiotics, the antibiotic testing kits cost about 100,000. And one test costs between 400 and 500 shillings. So when you look at that cost, it's not possible that the farmers or the cooperatives are able to shoulder that cost on their own. We need government to come in and other agencies to facilitate this kind of testing. Because it is only when you do this that then you can say you are giving safe milk in terms of antibiotics and other contaminants. But all in all, I want to say that all is not lost. We have hope that if all what the panelists have said and if all the interventions I've had can be put into place, then I think we can start moving. So you allow me to give a few suggestions that I think would help in terms of achieving food safety from a farmer's perspective. Number one, I think it is important for government to start working as government when it comes to issues of food safety. In a lot of times, what we see in government is departments working independently. But from the presentations that have been done here by Dr. Gonzo and others, I have seen, and it is a fact, that we need about 4 or 5 government departments to come together, form a multi-sectoral committee that will look at issues of food safety. Because one department will do, but will not be able to do end-to-end. So we need to seriously, for government to seriously think of that, both at national level and also at county level. Number two, I think in terms of budget, it is important to have farmers facilitated to be able to provide safe food to the consumers. And the only way to do that is first and foremost through education. A lot of education that we get targeting the farmers is on production, but very little in terms of food safety. So in terms of moving forward and also with the health challenges that we're having now, it is very, very important that we should have serious input in terms of food safety. And I want to say something also to Mr. Bimal. Thank you very much. I attended the Agricultural Summit where ASNET was launched. And I want to say that as farmers, we are very optimistic that finally we have a platform which is both the private sector and government which can come in and probably make this dream of farmers being able to give safe food and also to improve production through the partnership. So I'm happy to hear that ASNET is up and running. We'll be looking forward to hearing more from ASNET, the Secretariat, and everybody else. So coming back to Nyandarua very specifically, is to say that I know currently we have a bill that is the finance bill that is going through cabinet and then later to the assembly. And we only hope that these areas of food safety, particularly in terms of cold storage, both for milk and other fresh produce, will be taken as a top priority, because it is only if we achieve that then the consumers can be able to get good safe food. And finally, something came up very strongly initially about the need for the consumers to be educated on food, on safe food. I know Kenyans have the roadside mentality that when you sell produce on the roadside, it is assumed it is cheaper or it's better. And I look at it every time I see the health hazards and the risks that go with that. So the consumers also need to, there should be a public effort to educate consumers on the need for safe food, and safe food cannot be roadside food. So I think that these are some of the interventions that we need to move into. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murega, and very key points that you've provided. Ideally, awareness is very key. If we're even to champion for investment in food safety, we need to be aware of what food safety is and what we need to do to ensure we have food safety. And coordination, as you've mentioned, Mr. Murega, is key, and also investing budget to make the awareness very available to the farmers themselves. Finally, the last person I'd like to bring in before we have our closing statements from our keynote speakers is Mr. Joram Gisheru, who is an IEA associate, which is the Institute of Economic Affairs. He has great insights into food safety, the food safety system as it is, and you've worked very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture. And in closing, we'd like to hear your thoughts, hearing from the different ministries and also from a farmer representative and private sector. What are your thoughts on how we can actually increase investment in food safety, track our budgets, and make sure that our food safety system holistically addresses the issues that, as Kenya, we're trying to tackle? Yeah, Mr. Joram, can you hear us? Maybe if you can unmute yourself. Okay, I think we have probably lost him. So without further ado, I think I see him. Mr. Joram Gisheru, can you hear us? Seems we cannot hear your audio. Mr. Joram, can you hear us? Yeah, it seems your audio is not, we cannot hear you on your audio. Yeah, so I think maybe we can try get back to Mr. Joram Gisheru later. I'd like to move to the last section of this panel discussion, and I'll be directing this question to the panel, specific persons in the panel, and this is ideally on coordination. A lot of points have been brought out by all ministries and by our farmer representatives on the need for coordination. The need for coordination is very key. Without that, we cannot direct investment to the adequate sectors that need to be addressed, and we cannot coordinate food safety to adopt or even implement or ensure compliance for food safety. So maybe to Mr. Yeah, I think I'll go to Dr. Robert Kilonzo, if he's still there, from the Ministry of Health. Maybe in closing, your final statements and your views on coordination. With the establishment of, we had the NFSC being established, we have various bodies that have come up to try and coordinate food safety. Maybe in closing, what would you, as national government, how do we create that sense of urgency in food safety? And as a Ministry of Health, how do we ensure that coordination is not only secluded to boardroom meetings and sharing of ideas, but how do we ensure all ministries are going to work together and collaborate to make sure there's a sense of urgency in food safety and the challenges are being addressed as a whole, holistically, by all arms of government. So maybe if you can give your views, how, as a Ministry of Health and as a representative of the national government, how are we addressing matters of coordination and how do we move forward? What do you advise, Dr. Kilonzo?
Thank you very much, Brenda, and thank you earlier speakers for job well done. Let me say that coordination for us as a ministry is very important. Looking at the way the food safety matrix of the framework of food safety is in the country, because we are so many actors. You see, we have some actors who pick a specific part of the chain. There are other actors who pick a whole part of the chain. For example, allow me to give examples here. Look at Kenya Daily Board. It picks the entire chain. But as they pick the entire chain, you'll get the Ministry of Health as an interest. You'll get Kenya Bureau of Standards as an interest. You'll get Director Veterinary Services as an interest. You'll get Director Livestock Production as an interest. But as a regulator, the Daily Board is picking the entire chain. And therefore, coordination here is very key. As you realize that we have been having the National Food Safety Coordinating Committee, which has served us since 2006. But we have tried to get out of the coordination whereby you're just calling for meetings, you have meetings, you want to make agenda items, and that's all. And what the National Food Safety Committee, Coordinating Committee has been doing is it has been working through subcommittees which have been formed for a specific function. For example, we had an issue with respect to mycotoxins, and therefore we formed a subcommittee of NFSCC to look into that. Now, as a country, we have tried to get out of this gentleman's agreement, which is not embedded in any law, and now we are working with what we are calling multi-annual national control plan. The way this plan works is that you'll get all these whom we call CCS, Central Competent Authorities. They have developed their annual work plan. And the annual work plan is completely interrelated with all the agencies. If I may give you an example, I'm privy to the work which was done in Laikipia through the Laikipia County and the DVS with respect to livestock identification and traceability. It is because that is part of their multi-annual national control plan with respect to the elements of the DVS. That is just one of the examples I'm giving. So you realize that each of these institutions is having the plan which has been developed with the clear principles on food control. Whereby, as I said earlier, we are changing the policy, or rather the philosophy with respect to food safety. So coordination will be very key, but it depends on how you really want to do this coordination. Sometimes we get a challenge whereby somebody may not be able to, what I mean by somebody, a regulator may not be able to act with the speed at which we want to, for example, to control a specific event. And therefore, it's at that point we call for a physical meeting. So with the multi-annual national control plan, we'll have quarterly meetings and quarterly reports, which are supposed to be sent to the central coordinator, who is the Minister of Health, and in particular Kilonzo, who has been on this task. That notwithstanding, as a country, we have tried to evaluate ourselves. And we have seen that we need to update and review our policy of 2013. That is work which has been started, being led from agriculture and health, with respect to change of the policy and review this policy. We are privy to the developments with respect to the law and the bill and the food safety bill for the purpose of driving the food safety agenda for this country. And these are matters which all of us, we need inputs and collaboration to everybody so that we can be able to get good documents which are able to serve us. For example, the policy, we are almost like there. It's only a few elements on the policy which are touching on the regime with respect to the food safety. Where will you anchor it? Only that. All the other aspects done and dusted. It's a matter of now throwing to the public for the public to give their comment. So that is, in a nutshell, the way, the coordination we are looking at. And as we wait for the policy and for the law, we are scaling up coordinations with the specific to certain food chains. For example, with the Kenya Bureau of Standards and the county government, the COG and the Minister of Health, we have already worked with a way in which we are going to handle matters with respect to release of laboratory results on mycotoxins, because we have been blamed so much. And I remember the comments by Bimal that you test, and from there you want to say, remove this brand out of the market, recall this, go and destroy that. We have already worked on it with a MOU together with the leadership of the Minister of Trade, and the PSS have been very clear with what the government wants. So very soon we will be able to see another approach in which some of the regulatory measures will be implemented. There will be a lot of coordination into that. And all this finally will be cemented when we come up with the food safety bill and a food safety policy to guide the nation. Allow me to just make one comment with respect to the domestic markets and what is happening. I've seen even in the presentations by earlier speakers, the way the horticulture produce is being sold in our markets. We have started thinking on how do we manage what we call the wet markets. Wet markets here, we refer to the open markets. It's a common term which is used across the globe. And there's something we are working with together with all regulators who have a stake with respect to foods on display. And specifically here is Minister of Health and Minister of Agriculture through Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, together with the support elsewhere, on how do we ensure that the government plays their part with respect to infrastructure, and we, the national government, play our part with respect to the capacity building on what is expected of that mama boga. You may find that that mama boga ideally is not aware exactly what are the dangers of displaying on the ground, displaying on just a canvas. She may not be aware of that, but immediately you will be able to build the capacity with respect to these business operators. You expect the food business operators to comply. The food safety surveillance system, which Vivian talked in her slides, is something we are working on. We don't want to pick a lot which we can't chew. We are picking fruits and vegetables and also cereals. One thing I know, any business operator, immediately you are aware that you are being observed. Allow me to use observed with respect to surveillance. Definitely, it has shown that you are able to comply. I'm not saying that this is a system which we are putting in to see whom we are going to punish and whom we are not going to punish. That is not how the system works. The system will work by monitoring specific hazards. Immediately we find that brand X belonging to Kilonzo is having consistent measurements above the normal. We have a sitting with Kilonzo and we ask Kilonzo, this and this is happening. Can you tell us exactly what is it you're not doing right, yet we build capacity in you? These are the first initial measures which we want to engage with the food business operators. Because we have every evidence, unless you engage them, the running and the policing is not going to assist us. Taking you to court is not going to assist us.